Patience is not a sign of weakness. It is the mask of a latent power waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. On the solitary stage of the Interstellar Council, the figure of Lomar Sen of the Lissar High Command adjusted his formal robes. With measured movements, the dim glow of the floating crystals, which had once symbolized unity and progress, now cast ominous shadows over the empty seats of the chamber. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if even the air had become aware of the impending judgment. Lomar's words echoed in everyone's minds, not a confession but an admission of fatal errors. How could a civilization so closely watched be so underestimated? Why did the simplest traits sometimes mask the most deadly? These questions undoubtedly loomed large over observers of any species. The answer, Lomar knew, lay in the collective arrogance of the Lissarians, a civilization that interpreted smiles and diplomacy as weakness and submission. Humans were an enigma that defied common sense, patience in times of provocation, cordiality in the face of humiliation. But the truth was disturbing. Their patience was not infinite, it was intentional. In the center of this room, 6 months ago, Ambassador Velasquez warned us about the limits of human patience, Lomar began, gesturing to the scarred floor of the debate stage. His words were clear, but we, blinded by our hubris, dismissed them as mere poetic metaphors. A distant explosion interrupted the heavy silence, but Lomar did not back down. He knew the defenses would hold, at least for now. On that fateful occasion, the warning went unheeded. Humans, with their unique ability to calculate risks and bide their time, had become something else, a deadly adversary. Their patience was not passivity, but strength in repose, Lomar concluded. The recording crystals focused on his face. As we laughed, they learned. As we underestimated, they grew. And when we crossed the line with the massacre on the Star Strider, their legendary patience finally snapped. Red emergency lights bathed the room as Lomar stood firm, his eyes fixed on the logs. Let this be a timeless warning. Never mistake patience for weakness. When awakened, those who wait can also destroy. And it was at that moment that we understood. The true prison was never the shackles imposed, but the pride that blinded us to the impending abyss. A shrill alarm echoed off the walls of the room, but Kaelor Dane, ambassador of the High Council of Zarnis, remained motionless. His 2 pairs of eyes stared fixedly into the glowing core of the recording crystal. Every word he spoke was laden with resignation and historical weight. What follows is a full account of how the Interstellar Council, in its arrogance, mistook patience for submission and paid the price in blood and ruin. Kaelor took a deep breath before continuing, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the table before him. 3 specific events marked the beginning of our collapse. Each was a deliberate step toward our own doom, masked by a false sense of control. With a gesture, he activated the first holographic recording. The council chamber took shape, with then-President Surathal presiding over the mining rights conference. The Epsilon Draconis incident, Kaelor began, where an administrative decision cut off 4 human colonies from their main source of income. 20,000 workers were sacrificed at the whim of a bureaucratic error. The image projected the figure of Ambassador Leah Corvin, her piercing eyes fixed on the president. These colonies have operated legally for over a decade, Leah said, her voice calm as an ocean before a storm. Their rights have been recognized by this very council. How can one mistake so conveniently wipe out years of effort? Sura's response was cold. The documentation submitted was not up to galactic standard. The decision has been made, and the rights have been transferred to the Tarvox Mining Consortium. The hologram flickered to the second incident. 3 months later, human trade routes were reclassified as restricted military zones, forcing merchant ships to pay exorbitant fees to use new space corridors. Leah was there once more. Her expression held no fury, only an uneasy calm. "The Human Federation notes this decision," she stated. "We ask only whether the Council has considered the consequences of this action. This matter is closed," Commissioner Valtros declared with a dismissive wave. Kayla paused the log. "That was when we should have known." But the final blow came soon after. The third log showed the Expansion Committee rejecting terraforming rights for overcrowded human colonies. Human patience, Kayla concluded with a bitter smile, was not infinite. It was a warning we ignored until it was too late. Have you enjoyed the story so far? Humanity is about to reveal its true strength, but the lessons they teach us could change everything. Don't miss this surprising plot. Subscribe to the channel now to follow this and other stories that explore the limits of power, patience, and the unexpected. Your journey is just beginning. True strength never rushes, but it never retreats either. It watches, learns, and waits until the right moment makes it irresistible. As the records room shook with the nearby explosions, Kayla Dane stood firm, his eyes fixed on the holographic crystal that played back the final moments of a catastrophic hubris. "It was at the fourth provocation that fate was sealed," he said, activating the next recording. The footage showed the Council approving with surprising speed the construction of luxurious Moxtarian resorts on 12 strategic worlds on the edge of human territory. Ambassador Leah Corvin was present again, but this time something in her eyes was different. For the first time, Kayla noticed what he had previously ignored. "It was not submission," he murmured, pausing the recording and zooming in on Leah's face. "It wasn't patience. It was the gaze of a predator, calculating every move, every heartbeat, until the inevitable attack." At that moment, the Council President Sura Thal interrupted Leah's words. "The human delegate will make no threats," he declared dismissively. Leah, however, only smiled, a smile that shone like glass under stress. "The Human Federation notes this decision," she replied, her voice soft and dangerous, "and will ensure that the Council's records are absolutely clear about the sequence of events that brought us here." The Council chamber laughed. The Moxtarians had called her a trained human, laughing openly as she continued to take notes. But that smile never wavered. Leah wasn't just taking notes for a bureaucratic report. She was documenting a trial, step by step, carefully building a dossier on the Council's failings. "She gave us every opportunity to reconsider," Kaylor continued, her fingers trembling as they tapped the holographic console. "And we ignored it. They gave us more chances than we deserved. We should have asked ourselves, what strength does it take to maintain such patience? And what happens when that patience is at its limit?" The crystal projected the last peaceful image the galaxy would ever see. The Star Dreamer, the legendary human research vessel, floated like a golden jewel in the void. Then the transmissions began. The Moxtarian fighters approached, their logos glowing in the darkness. "The Star Dreamer," Kayla whispered, her voice cracking. "That is what finally broke them, and in breaking their patience, we unleashed something we could not contain." The hologram flickered as a nearby explosion shook the room. Kayla closed her eyes briefly before fixing them back on the crystal. "And now, it is too late. There are times when formal statements are unnecessary because the weight of truth can crush any semblance of civility." The hologram flickered, projecting the last recording of the Star Dreamer's transmission. "This is the Star Dreamer. We are a research vessel studying quantum anomalies," said the steady, controlled voice of Captain Arlen Voss. His words, however, were abruptly cut off by a flurry of gunfire. Kayla Dane let the silence fill the room before continuing. 27 lives lost. 8 of them were children. young researchers, as the humans called them, conducting their first experiments in deep space. His voice cracked slightly, but he regained control. And we reduced it all to a simple, clerical error. The scene shifted to Commander Elias Chen entering the council chambers, not through the main doors, through the wall. The explosion was sudden, taking everyone by surprise, except perhaps Ambassador Leah Corvin, who stood still, as if expecting the inevitable outcome. "You are out of order," President Surathal exclaimed, but her voice was quickly drowned out by Chen's imposing presence. He strode to the center of the stage, his steps carrying the force of a human hurricane. "Play the record," he commanded, his voice at once calm and utterly unquestioning. The crystals projected images of children floating in zero gravity, their laughter echoing as they performed experiments, bantered about space food, and sang an old song about a major in the stars. Then came the first impact. The lights flickered, terror etched on their faces. Chen broke the silence. These children were writing thank you notes to the council for allowing them to travel. As their patrol ships armed their cannons, they were thanking them for the chance to see the stars. He held up a sheet of paper, a rare and personal artifact. "This is from Amy Chen, my 12-year-old daughter. Her last words were, 'Thank you for allowing us to see the stars.'" He placed the note gently on the podium, but the gesture was devastating. "You called it an unfortunate incident," Chen continued, each word heavy as an asteroid impact. "You said they shouldn't have been there. You said it was their fault." The silence in the chamber grew suffocating, as if gravity had increased. "Let me be clear. That note, those children, were the end of human patience." He looked up, fixing his gaze on the council representatives. "Today, you will learn that our patience was not infinite. It was the limit, and you crossed it. There are truths that are not revealed through weakness, but through strategy, and when discovered, they transform the fate of all." Leah Torrens stood, walking beside Ariane Villar. Her always diplomatic posture now took on the weight of decision. Firmly she declared, "The Terran Union not only notes this incident," her voice was like a sharp blade, "it remembers." The recording of the session spread throughout the galactic sector. Hundreds of species watched in astonishment as human patience finally ran out. It was at that moment that many realized they had never witnessed humanity in anger before. "We should have remembered Earth's ocean storms," Kaylor Dane said, turning to the recording crystal. "They are patient predators, not because they have to be, but because they can. There is no threat that hunts them, no challenge that forces them to run, until now." The emergency sensors flared again, announcing that the human fleet was even closer. Kaylor looked out, seeing another explosion rip through the Council's orbital shields. "We thought we were watching birds learning to fly," he muttered. But in truth, they were sleeping dragons, waiting to unfold their wings. At first, the Council scoffed. Councillor Arkan Velish said dismissively, "Let your outdated ships burn fuel. Perhaps that will ease your childish frustration." But then a transmission came on, cutting through all frequencies in Council space. The image of Commander Admiral Alina Reyes appeared on every screen. Her presence was commanding, her voice firm. "This is Commander Admiral Alina Reyes of the Terran Union Unified Fleet. For 4 decades, we have followed what we call the Veil Protocol. We presented a peaceful facade while our true capabilities remained hidden." Reyes's words swept through the room like a storm. "Our ships, our weapons, our technology, everything was designed to appear basic, not out of weakness but by choice, because we wanted peace. But that is over." And then the human ships began to change, not just in form, but in substance. What had once seemed like ancient hulls vibrated, like mirages revealing colossal gleaming forms adorned with unimaginable weapons. This is what broke Velish, Kalor said, her voice thick with tension. To see 300 seemingly obsolete ships shed their masks to reveal titans of war, ready for battle. But the real fear was not just in the ships. Something else was coming. Something that would challenge everything we knew. Arrogance blinded the Council, but reality hit them like a comet across the vast void. The Galactic Council's defense fleet, the supreme pride of its military strength, advanced confidently. 10,000 ships versus 300. The numerical disparity was so overwhelming that victory seemed inevitable. The Council leaders relaxed in their seats, certain that numerical superiority would decide the conflict before it even began. It was then that Commander Admiral Irina Kalov's transmission crossed space. His voice was icy, almost casual. What you will see now are demonstrations of 3 new technologies. Pay attention. There will be no second chances. The first shot came from a human ship. It wasn't plasma, laser, or any other conventional weapon. The surrounding space itself seemed to bend, as if the fabric of reality had decided to rest. 20 Council ships instantly disappeared, not exploding, but simply ceasing to exist. Localized quantum disintegration weapons, Kayla Dane explained to the recording crystal, recalling the reports. Technology they had had for decades, but had never used or even mentioned. The second demonstration was even more disturbing. 3 human ships converged their energies to form a gravitational lens. What was once an organized fleet turned into impossible shapes, like distorted sculptures. The wreckage, unable to withstand the gravitational stress, was annihilated within seconds. But it was the third demonstration that sealed the Council's fate. The holographic transmission revealed a single human ship, which, with a simple, invisible beam, destroyed 60 Council ships. They didn't explode. They simply disintegrated into a cloud of scattered atoms. Councillor Elvar Nomir, sweating under his ceremonial robes, cried out desperately, "Please stop! I beg you, stop!" Kalov's image reappeared on the screens, his face impassive. "Ah, so now you beg. Now finally you recognize the etiquette you ignored for so long." His voice carried a coldness that could cut through steel. "Let me reveal something else. We have 30,000 ships like these. For decades, we have watched, hoped and hoped for peace, but you killed our children while they looked up to the stars with hope. You destroyed their lives." Kalov paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "Now you see what happens when we stop being patient, when we stop limiting ourselves, when we show who we really are." Councillor Nomir, moving hesitantly to the center of the chamber, stammered, "We recognize our mistakes. We will make immediate amends. We will return all mining rights, trade routes, everything." Kalov smiled, a smile reminiscent of Leah Torrens, but with a sharper, almost cruel touch. "Oh, we're beyond that now," he replied. "Now we will discuss in detail the reorganization of the Council, fair representation, and the consequences for your actions. When the silence of a predator echoes, it is not empty. It is the waiting for a roar that will shake everything." Kaylor Dane stood, his scales trembling as he stared into the recording crystal. "You will sit and listen," he whispered, his voice cutting like blades. For it was humanity's patience, their restraint, that protected them from the true power they possess. The battle, if you could call it that, had been over in 6 minutes. A humiliation so complete that it had left the Council forces shattered more by shame than destruction. But the political restructuring would last 6 days, and the restoration of collective dignity, that, Kaylor knew, could take centuries. He glanced out to where the human fleet hovered. "We thought we were clever," he muttered. "We manipulated a young, naive species, as if they were mere pawns in a game only we understood. We never questioned how such a primitive race managed to navigate the stars. The defensive screens flashed with warnings, but the fleet remained still, waiting. It never occurred to us that their infinite patience was the privilege of a species so powerful that they could afford to wait until they no longer had to. Kaylor pressed the datapad containing the new bylaws of the Reformed Council. Humanity had not demanded revenge. They had demanded something far more devastating: competence, accountability, and integrity. The entire council had been remade on these premises, a structure that now seemed fragile in the face of human will. The holographic images shifted to the first session of the new council. Leotorin presided, her diplomatic smile gone, replaced by a stern look. At each session, a moment of silence was given to the victims of the Star Traveler, a reminder of the price of hubris and the cost of underestimation. The new rules were simple, but unforgiving. All decisions were to pass the Star Traveler test. Each policy had to answer: will this action protect the innocent? Will it serve the good of all, or only the privileged? Would you like this? Decision engraved in a thank you note from children. The emergency lights flashed from red to yellow. The human fleet stood by, as always, waiting, watching. Kaylor shivered. "We've learned other things about them too," he murmured. "Their historical record has been deliberately modest, their victories minimized, their failures magnified. They have presented themselves as survivors, never conquerors. But now we know." An alarm interrupted his thoughts. The delegation from Talaris Vorax had been spotted, fleeing to the far reaches of known space in a desperate attempt to escape the wrath of humanity. There, they had found something else. Human ships, silently stationed for decades, watching, waiting, as if they had always known this moment would come. "The humans have a saying," Kaylor continued, "something about true strength being measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the choice not to." He took a deep breath, his chest heavy with the truth. They have chosen time and time again to be patient. They have chosen to give us every opportunity to overcome our ignorance, to transcend our limitations. And now, we will choose what we do with this last chance. He looked at the recording crystal. His words meant, "For future generations, let this be recorded. Human patience has run out, but their choice to spare us will be our final judgment." The end need not be silence. It can be the lesson that resonates forever. Kaylor Dane adjusted his ceremonial robes for the last time, as if the act would restore the Council's lost dignity. The Council would survive, but it would never be the same. Humanity claimed no authority beyond its rightful place at the table, but its ships stood, silent, watchful. Its diplomats still wore those enigmatic smiles, as patient as they were dangerous. Outside, through the crystal walls of the chambers, Kaylor could see the human fleet looming above. It was a paradoxical spectacle, frightening in its power, yet indescribably beautiful. The Council's defenders had failed. The last barrier between what had been and what would be now fell. "Future species," Kaylor began, his voice grave. As he spoke into the recording crystal, "when you meet humanity, you will see friendship. You will see patience. You will see a willingness to listen, to negotiate, and even to compromise. But never, ever mistake this for weakness." A transmission cut across all frequencies, Commander Admiral Alina Reyes's voice sounding calmer than ever. "Representative Kaylor Dane, this is your final evacuation notice. You have 10 minutes to complete your testimony and make your way to the safe zone. It would be a shame to delay the demolition." Kaylor gave a bitter laugh. "Even now," he muttered, "on the verge of destroying the symbol of our former arrogance, they give us time, a warning, a chance to make things right." He adjusted his thoughts to the conclusion. Humanity is now a member of the Historical Ethics Committee. Their first contribution was a simple but devastating warning that is now engraved on the base of every council building. Patience is not weakness. Restraint is not incapacity. Those who choose to be kind have proven they can be ruthless. A soft chime sounded, indicating 5 minutes remaining. Kaylor looked up at the crystal. A final note to any species listening to this record: human patience was not infinite, but their capacity for forgiveness seems to be. They remember everything, forgive almost everything, but never forget. The final chime sounded. 1 minute. This is Kaylor Dane, final diplomat of the Interstellar Council. Testimony closed. He paused, bowing one last time to the crystal. And to the humanity that will inevitably review this record, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your restraint. And most of all, thank you for giving us the chance to learn from wisdom before we were forced to learn from fear. Kaylor turned, walking toward the evacuation zone as the timer began, Alina's voice unchanging in its precision. Demolition in 10, 9. When the cameras finally fell, some witnesses swore they heard a distant melody, children singing an ancient song about a traveler in the stars. Kaylor knew the truth. It was human patience, teaching its final lesson. This was the story of how patience can be the most lethal of weapons, and how true power lies not in destruction, but in the choice not to use it. If you want more stories that challenge your perception of the universe, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, so you don't miss any updates. And remember, never underestimate those who wait, because those who wait have the power to rewrite destinies.